Hello, everybody. A very warm welcome to the Nahrain Network's webinar on climate emergency and cultural heritage in Iraq. My name is Professor Eleanor Robson. I'm the Professor of Ancient Middle Eastern History here at University College London and Director of the Nahrain Network. A very warm welcome to you all. I'm going to spend a few minutes explaining what we're going to be doing this evening, and then I'll hand over to our expert speakers. First of all, thank you so much for coming. This is such an important topic. We spend, many of us in this webinar are experts on cultural heritage and are aware through our practice of how devastating the climate emergency is in Iraq. We see it as we travel around the country and as we do our work. The incredible heat we have to endure, the devastating loss of water in the rivers and in the marshes, and the desertification, the abandonment of farms. And as non-experts, I think we all find it very deeply distressing. Conversely, we're very honoured to have several real experts in various aspects of environmental study and climate emergency with us, who are perhaps less familiar with Iraqi cultural heritage. They're again probably very familiar in a non-professional context with the incredible richness and depths of Iraq's heritage. So the big question is, how do we work together as environmental experts, climate emergency experts, and cultural heritage experts? Because together, I think they form the bedrock of what Iraq is. It's its history, its land, its people, its natural resources. Without Iraq's heritage, without Iraq's climate and environment, Iraq is going to really desperately suffer. So we're here to upskill, or certainly I am, to learn more and how we can support each other together. So I'm hugely grateful to everybody, many eminent speakers tonight, who are going to give us, first of all, some general conceptual tools to work with, and then some case studies. We're also very honoured to have Dr. Hassan Al-Janabi as former Minister of Water Resources to talk to us about policy as well. So all of this will be really helpful. I'm particularly thankful to Nahrain's Deputy Director, Dr. Mehyar Kadhim, for organising the event, and for everyone who has collaborated with him, and to our communications and social media expert, Zainab Mahdi. Before we start, I want you all to bear in mind that over the next little while, the Nahrain Network will be offering grants. So one of the things we do is fund research, Iraqi-led research into the ways in which history and heritage and related subjects in the humanities can support life in Iraq, whether it's cultural life, social, economic, political, and increasingly now the climatic resilience. So we have several schemes that we fund. We have just currently selecting our latest set of visiting scholars, but we have just opened our most important funding source, that is our research grants. And Zainab, I hope, will share in the chat the link to our website where you can read more about the awards. We'll be running a webinar in 4 weeks' time, 4 weeks today, on the 3rd of October, on how to apply for the grants if the information on our website's not enough. We're particularly looking for projects that unite climate emergency and cultural heritage in this round of funding. So please do have a look at that. So as long as we have several criteria for eligibility. The most important one beyond the topics is that there are Iraqis in Iraq in the research leadership team. But I'll leave you to read in more detail if you like. The other thing to say about these grants is that the first round of applications is a very simple online form. We don't require a lot of information to begin with. We select the most interesting and viable projects to go forward to be developed. So please do look into them. So right, now that I've said my bit on the network, let me say a little bit more about what's going to happen this evening. So I'm sure you know we have 6 very eminent speakers tonight, so there's a lot to get through. So Dr. Mejia is going to chair the session. We're going to ask each of them to speak in for about 10 or 15 minutes on their particular areas of expertise. We will take a break after about an hour or so. If you have questions for our speakers, please put them in the Q&A and we will come to them, we'll collect them together and we'll come to them at the end. So, you know, I think you will have seen the notice that this is being recorded. So if you miss anything, you'll be able to listen to it and come back to it. Most of our speakers will be speaking English. Some will be speaking in Arabic. Dr. Mejia will translate. If you would like to ask your questions in English or Arabic, either is fine and we will do the appropriate translation. So please just speak in whichever language you're most comfortable. So I think I have covered all the practicalities. I'm looking forward very much to learning a lot this evening, and I'm very grateful indeed for our speakers for joining us today. So I'm going to hand over to Mejia now to introduce our first speaker. Thank you, Mejia.
Thank you, Eleanor. Our first speaker is Dr. Alexandra Gargon, from Senior Lecturer in Geography and focusing on climate change, with a growing body of research on cultural heritage at Liverpool John Moores University. Dr. Alexandra, if you could share your presentation.
Okay, can you see it? Perfect. Okay, thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this event. I'm looking forward to learn a lot today and for future collaboration. Is it okay to go ahead now? Okay. So I've been invited to give a talk today on my work on looking at climate change risk and cultural heritage. It hasn't focused, yes, in Iraq. It started in Europe, moving to Southeast Asia, but it is also some papers, some topics are global or of relevance to the region, and I look forward for future collaboration on this topic. Okay, so humans' resilience on fossil fuel is, as you know, warming the planet, and a warmer planet intensifies climate extremes such as droughts, floods, and heat waves. And such intensified climate extremes and slow onset events such as warmer temperature, gradual transition towards a drier or wetter climate resulting from a changing climate lead to damage and loss of cultural heritage. And the reason is that changes in atmospheric parameters such as precipitation, temperature, relative humidity, in addition to impacts such as sea level rising, storm surges, flooding, droughts, among others, can aggravate the chemical, biological, and mechanical degradation of cultural heritage, as well as a potential loss of cultural heritage assets. Hence, climate change poses a challenge to the conservation of cultural heritage. This is one old slide from one of my colleagues in the engineering who I've worked with on my research on climate change and cultural heritage. So we can see here that they are, depending on the temperature or the rainfall, there's either mechanical or chemical weathering happening. And so this is in an old textbook, so it's in an American textbook. So it is in Fahrenheit here, but here you have close to 32 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the equivalent to the freezing point. So you will have, due to the freeze-thaw cycle, you will have mechanical weathering due to the happening. And as you go towards a wetter climate, towards the left here, you will have chemical weathering due, for example, to precipitation being slightly acidic. And as shown by the red arrow here, a change towards a warmer and wetter conditions, for instance, will increase chemical weathering. So in addition to what is shown here in relation to mechanical and chemical weathering due to climatic changes, biological weathering can also occur due to changes in the vegetative cover. The cultural heritage on the coast is also exposed to threats from the sea, obviously. And as shown here for the World Heritage Site of Skara Brae in the Orkney Islands situated in the north of Scotland, where a seawall protects the site. Climate change has led to the need to evaluate potential risk to inform adaptation. So in order to inform adaptation, we need to know what are the risks that could potentially happen to prioritize notably conservation efforts. And in ICOMOS, which stands for the International Council on Monuments and Sites, back in 2019, they summarized the climatic factors and their mechanisms and impacts on cultural heritage derived from consultation with experts. In a recent paper for Wireless Climate Change, which is published by the Royal Geographical Society and the Royal Meteorological Society in the UK, we also reviewed such climate change impacts on cultural heritage worldwide by synthesizing climate change prediction from the scientific literature. So we reviewed a body of 100 peer-reviewed empirical research papers that to summarize what is the state of knowledge on the impacts of climate change. And we produce a number of diagrams, such as just copy and pasted one part of a diagram here, depicting the relationships between various climatic stressors and the impact on cultural heritage, allowing the determination of the potential effects of climate change on heritage without, for example, for decision makers, for them not to have to assess the literature thoroughly. And the figure, well, the part of the figure here on the left, will show that you have here the climatic stressor on the left. What is the hazard related to that? So if you have an increase in precipitation, for instance, as shown here, you will have a change in relative humidity, longer period of wetness, moisture accumulation on the walls. And then what is the potential mechanisms that can happen to lead to specific impacts on cultural heritage is what you can identify using the figure here. So an impact here will be biological growth. As you can see here in the bottom left figures, so some vegetative cover or moss here growing on historic buildings, on stones, or on the right here as shown in Italy here. So the process of salt crystallization here as water evaporates from the stone, obviously there's a residue of salt that is left behind. In addition to those diagrams, for every time there is a relationship, an arrow that is shown, one can also use the associated table here to identify where does that evidence come from for that specific impact via the mechanism leading to that impact. The review is global, albeit it is dominated by European research, given that it's been the geographical focus of a lot of the research that has been accomplished to date. Out of the 100 studies reviewed focusing on climate change and cultural heritage, there's a highly limited number of studies originating from several parts of the world, including the Middle East and India. So if you just cutting and pasting part of the table here, so you have impacts on climate change impacts on outdoor cultural heritage, you also have on the indoor cultural heritage, but also impacts on changes in the natural physical environment on cultural heritage, starting from the studies that were global with what is the climatic scenarios that they look at, looking to the continental scale and the country level. With regard to, for example, changes in the natural physical environment on cultural heritage, the only study we could find from the Middle East was from Yemen, looking at the risk of flooding to mud architecture. So in this case, it's important to emphasize that we look at empirical research, that researchers that collected data. So it's not literature review here, and it's not that we were looking at, and not including the papers where they think about they write about potential impact, but only where there's empirical evidence for that impact. So just to summarize, what are the what is the, just to provide in 3 key points, what is an overview of climate change impact? But water is the primary agent of material degradation, at least in Europe. And when coupled with warmer temperature, increased precipitation, and water-related variables such as humidity cycles and period of wetness, it can cause or enhance different decay mechanisms. And an increase in wind-driven rain will also affect heritage, particularly in the presence of sand, salt, and atmospheric pollutants. And this can lead to surface abrasion, increased water penetration, structural damage, and potentially the collapse of structure. And warmer temperature may also increase the freeze-thaw cycles on the daily temperature range, affecting the occurrence of thermoclastism, which may intensify the physical weathering of stone and ceramic materials. So the most effective way to avert or minimize further climate-induced loss and damage to cultural heritage is obviously to reach net zero, meaning no anthropogenic emissions of greenhouse gases. Nonetheless, we are committed to a certain degree of warming, even if emissions were to stop overnight due to past emissions. So current efforts to mitigate climate change, to reduce our carbon footprints, will determine the climate of the second half of the century. Considering this, actions to prepare for and adjust to the impacts of climate change are necessary, given the current and projected changes, to minimize potential damage or avoidable loss and damage to cultural heritage. And what is particular about adaptation in the field of cultural heritage is the need to adapt while preserving the values related to the authenticity and integrity of the heritage site. Some adaptation solutions sacrifice heritage values or affect the site's authenticity. An example made by some interviewees, obtained from some interviewees as part of a PhD project I supervised by Dr. Elena Cezana, was the construction of shelters over heritage site, as we can see here on the island of Malta in the Mediterranean. Although protecting the site against the elements like solar radiation, rain, this adaptation solution can disturb the unity between the heritage object and the landscape and decrease the authenticity of the archaeological site due to the addition of this non-indigenous element. And then another example would be a decision to move the heritage site to its location on an eroding coastline, which will inevitably put it out of context, affecting its authenticity. And this issue of authenticity is also relevant when it comes to reducing the carbon footprint, for example, of historical buildings. Just 2 more slides here. So just we've been mapping the learning process in examples of adapting cultural heritage to climate change. Most of the adaptation that's being done is mostly using what's called a single loop process. So you have an impact, a climate change impact, and you want to adapt to preserve the heritage site. So it's very reactionary adaptation. But very few examples of what is called a double loop learning process. So in this, what is different with this is that it involves rethinking current procedure that requires a degree of critical thinking in identifying the best solution to a problem. It is better when addressing issues that can evolve with a change of circumstances such as climate change. So in other words, when you're using a double loop process, you're not only looking at adapting to an issue, to a specific flood, for example, so recover from that flood. But in your adaptation strategies, you're also looking at climate change scenarios, for example, what could happen in the next 30, 40, 50 years, and so on, so that you're making the site resilient not only to the same type of event that you've been experiencing, but also to future events that could happen. So just some concluding remarks and research needs. This paper presented a brief overview of the impacts of climate change on cultural heritage worldwide, highlighting the need for studies in several regions of the world. Adapting to climate change obviously requires understanding of what could happen. And interviews that we're here focusing in a European World Heritage Site found that there's a lack of awareness of the consequences of gradual changes in climate, gradual degradation due to long-term climate change on World Heritage Sites. However, awareness of the effect of extreme events and the impact on heritage was significantly higher, for example, flooding. But a constraint to adaptation is the need for information on adaptive responses, not only technical know-how on how to adapt, but also when it comes to research on cultural heritage and especially adaptation, is the difficulty of generalizing adaptation solution due to diversity of typology of cultural heritage, the consideration of heritage values, as mentioned before earlier, the different geographical locations of heritage assets and the context in which they're located, and also the uncertainty with regard to the effectiveness of adaptation measures. And what we're seeing now more and more is looking at indigenous knowledge and learning for the past and using this knowledge to make our sites more resilient. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. That was a really good introduction to the debates. So now we move on to Dr. Hassan Al-Janabi, former Minister of Water Resources, and I would also say an activist in the field of environmental change, environmental improvement in Iraq. And so we are very eager to listen to Dr. Janabi's perspective on policy, also his experience leading a major ministry, the Ministry of Water Resources. راح تتكلم باللغة العربية دكتور؟ تفضل.
نعم. شكرا جزيلا مهيار، شكرا إلينور, Alexander. I really benefited from this presentation, and I salute all the colleagues in this session. موضوع التغيرات المناخية في العراق موضوع شائك حقيقة، وعلاقتها طبعا بالإرث الثقافي ليست بالضرورة سهلة. يعني العراق بلد الحضارة قديمة جدا، والحضارة السومرية الأولى هي يعني تسمى حضارة الماء. أنا ما أعرف إذا تريدني أتوقف وأترجم ولا
كمل دكتور، واني يعني بفد 3 دقائق 4 دقائق أترجم يعني ما بعرف.
الحضارة السومرية هي حضارة الماء، وعموما حضارة يعني في العراق هي حضارة الماء والطين، هي أيضا حضارة طينية وليست يعني حجرية، وبالتالي فرص ضياع الإرث الثقافي كبيرة جدا في التغيرات المناخية والطقسية، سواء في حالات الفيضان أو أيضا في حالات الجفاف التي قد تسبب النزوح، انعدام شروط الحياة وما شاكل.
كمل دكتور كمل.
نحن في العراق باعتقادي يعني ما توجد لدينا إمكانيات حقيقية لدراسة تأثير التغيرات المناخية على بلدنا. طبعا الآن صارت ما يشبه الموضة، أنه كثير من منظمات المجتمع المدني، كثير من ربما جامعات أو كليات أو كذا تنظم فعاليات لها علاقة بالتغيرات المناخية، ولكن ما يفتقد في هذا النشاط هو الخبراء الحقيقيين الذين يقدمون مادة حقيقية عن التغير المناخي في العراق. يعني ما يدور في العراق من نشاط حول هذا الأمر هو عبارة عن ما تنشره الصحافة سواء كانت الأجنبية أو العربية، ثم يتناوله من يدعي الخبرة، وأيضا تتلاقفه محطات تلفزيونية وصحفية، وتكرر أشياء وأيضا تنتشر أخطاء كبيرة جدا يعني في هذا النشاط المحموم حول الموضوع. أنا أيضا في جولاي 2018 يوم 11 جولاي أنا كنت عضو بالكابينة الوزارية، وأيضا كنت الوزير الوحيد المدعو من قبل مجلس الأمن الدولي لتقديم إحاطة عن تأثيرات التغير المناخي وعلاقتها بالاستقرار والأمن في المنطقة والعالم. وأعتقد كانت هذيك فرصة يعني يونيك للعراق لكي يرفع صوته في هذا المحفل الدولي. ولكن هذيك الإسهامة أو الانتباه الدولي إلى العراق لم تجد لها صدى حقيقيا لدى الحكومة العراقية، وطبعا بالضرورة ليست لدى المجتمع ولدى الخبراء والمهتمين، بسبب أن المجتمع العراقي يعني يواجه مشكلات أكثر آنية ومشكلات حقيقية بالحياة اليومية، والحكومة دائما معنية بحل مشكلات ذات طابع يومي أو آني تشغيلي وليس استراتيجي. الاهتمام يبدو أنه مؤخرا هناك بعض الاهتمام الإعلامي الحكومي. أنا أعتقد مهيار حكيت كثيرا، وأنا خاف تروح كثير من هذه الشغلات.
نعم. thank you,
أو
Dr.
يضوجون يعني المستمعين. Otherwise I switch to
I will
English.
translate. Thank you. So Dr. Hassan Janabi is underlining the significance of the environment in terms of Iraq, which is also in large part based on a history of environmental or mud-based life, if you like. The changes in environment are transformative, leading to the transformation of life, including displacement. In Iraq, we don't have the sort of capacity to address some of these issues, or more specifically, researchers and experts that can actually undertake professional studies of climatic change and climate change in Iraq. What we do have, however, is in Iraq is a significant amount of media that spews or provides wrongful information or misinformation about the nature of the relationship about climate change in Iraq. And he was Dr. Hassan on July 11th was recently invited to the cabinet to speak as a former minister, to speak about this issue as a national security issue. And the government is often asked to address or expected to address and solve daily issues, but in the process has dismissed or has not focused on more strategic policies. So yeah.
نعم، أنا قلت يعني يظهر مؤخرا هناك بعض الاهتمام إعلاميا لدى الحكومة بالتغير المناخي، ولكن هذا الاهتمام أنا أعتقد هو اهتمام شكلي وليس اهتماما حقيقيا، لأنه البرامج أو البرنامج الحكومي والبرامج المتفرعة، يعني البرامج الوزارية المتفرعة عن البرنامج الحكومي الرئيسي، ليس لها علاقة لا من قريب ولا من بعيد بقضية التغير المناخي، ولا يعني لم ترد كلمة التكيف على سبيل المثال في أي برنامج حكومي عراقي. وبالتالي يعني البزنس as usual، يعني حكومة توفر مبالغ، وهذه المبالغ تذهب إلى وزارات أو إلى مؤسسات، ثم تذهب إلى مشاريع هي مشاريع تقليدية أو مشاريع ربما قد تكون يعني عرفت أو تحددت في ظروف سابقة، مثل ما هو الوضع في وزارة الموارد المائية على سبيل المثال. المشاريع التي تنفذها الوزارة هي مشاريع اللي يعني تم تحديدها قبل 30 40 سنة 50 سنة بدون الأخذ بنظر الاعتبار التحولات التي حصلت. وبالتالي الاهتمام هو اهتمام شكلي، يعني حضور إعلامي، حضور بالكوب 27، ربما راح يكون حضور أيضا مكثف بالكوب 28 والكوبات السابقة. أيضا كان هناك وفود كبيرة. أنا أتذكر استماع باريس كان الوفد العراقي حوالي 100 شخص يعني وهذا كان طبعا فشيء يعني غير معقول وغير مفيد ومسيء حقيقة للوضع العراقي. على on the other side الاهتمام الشعبي بقضية التغير المناخي هو اهتمام عفوي، يعني is not like informative knowledge، واهتمام عفوي. وهذا الاهتمام نابع من نقص الخدمات التي يشهدها المجتمع العراقي والدولة العراقية، بمعنى إحساس العراقيين بالتغير المناخي يزداد شدة في الصيف، وتجد الجميع يحكون عن التغير المناخي لأنه ما في كهرباء، وبالتالي ما في إمكانية للتبريد، وبالتالي يعني هذه الخدمة مقطوعة، فالناس تجد أنه فرصة للحديث عن التغير المناخي. وكذلك المؤسسات الحكومية تفسر عجزها عن تقديم هذه الخدمات بالتغير المناخي، سواء كان هذه الخدمات خدمات الماء والزراعة والفلاحة والأهواء، أو الخدمات الأخرى خدمات الطاقة. والعراق طبعا لا تزال كل شيء في العراق قائم على أساس الطاقة التقليدية. و يعني الحديث عن التغير المناخي في ظل الاعتماد الكلي على الطاقة التقليدية أيضا يعني شيء من يعني بيع مواقف إعلامية ليست ذات معنى. أيضا يرتبط الإحساس الشعبي أو الإحساس المجتمعي بالتغير المناخي، يعني ينعكس بشكل كبير من إحساسنا أيضا بالشحة المائية السائدة خلال هذه السنوات، وطبعا السنوات التي سبقت. ونحن في هذا الإحساس القاسي بنقص المياه والشحة المائية ننسى أيضا الفاعلين الحقيقيين الذين تسببوا بما يواجهه المجتمع والقطاع المائي. على سبيل المثال، كثير من الحديث يدور عن جفاف الأهوار حاليا، والأهوار من المواضيع العزيزة والقريبة جدا يعني على نفسي وعلى كياني، وأنا جزء مهم من حياتي المهنية في هذا المجال. ولكن أنا لم أنسى ولن أنسى الفاعلين الحقيقيين الذين يعني أسهموا بتجفيف هذه الأهوار عن طريق قرارات سياسية واستخدام جهد الدولة في الثمانينات والتسعينات لتجفيف هذه الأهوار. ثم بعد ذلك طبعا صار تغيير أساسي بموقف الدولة من هذا الموضوع ما بعد 2003، واستطعنا أن نستعيد ما كان يمكن استعادته من الأهوار، ومحاولة إرجاع يعني حوالي ربما 30-40% مما كان سابقا، وكنا سعداء بهذا الموضوع. ولكن أيضا سياسات تشغيلية وقرارات حكومية أدت إلى أن منطقة الأهوار تعاني معاناة أخرى ربما أكثر شدة مما عانته في فترات تحت النظام السابق. يمكن صار كثير المادة، تمام ولا؟
لا جيد، شكرا دكتور. The additional points being made, the Iraqi government and government institutions do not see or view climate change as a major priority, and this is not reflected neither in programs nor policy. And this continues to be neglected as a priority when it comes to the design and delivery of what Dr. Hassan calls conventional programs that have been developed over time, in terms of programs that are government programs regarding the implementation of services. And those programs are generally do not have a prioritization or a major concern regarding climate change, or for that matter, being responsive to the changes that have happened in Iraq over the past few decades. Now, there were 100 delegates also at COPA from Iraq, and this is what Dr. Hassan alludes to is a dysfunctional state, because it doesn't represent a cohesive policy when it comes to addressing climate change. There is a popular concern from people, but it's responsive, it's reactionary, and it often flares up in the hot months of summer. The government responds to this, but only in a limited fashion. Also, media is not helping in this regard, and the climate change issue or emergency is reflected in the significant reduction in water resources and the drought, and we've seen this in the marshes, in the reduction in water in the marshes, and this is as a result of deliberate policy over the past few decades, but also poor policy in relation to addressing the major challenges that the marshes have faced, and people were content at some point of returned at some point through some kind of intervention, even graver than they were before when it comes to the marshes. Further.
Okay. Just to continue on the marshes issues, أنا حكيت عن سياسات حكومة سابقة بتجفيف الأهوار. وأيضا I touched on الحكومة السابقة بعض الإجراءات التشريعية، حكومة الكاظمي بالضبط. أيضا كانت هناك سياسات يعني مفتعلة وسياسات يعني متعمدة بتجفيف على الأقل هور الحوزة، ولكن ما تعانيه الأهوار يعني باعتبارها أيضا موقع للإرث الإنساني، الأهوار أصبحت يعني سجلت على لائحة التراث العالمي بجولاي 2016 الأهوار والمواقع الأثرية الأخرى. وهنا طبعا هذا الربط بين يعني علاقة التغير المناخي بالإرث الثقافي أيضا، وهذه تأثرت ليس فقط بالسياسات المتعمدة للحكومات العراقية المتعاقبة، وإنما أيضا بالشبكة السيطرة التي أنجزت على منابع وعلى أعمدة نهري دجلة والفرات والروافد يعني في العراق وفي دول الجوار. وبالتالي لا يمكن لأي إيكو سيستم أو يعني لنظام على سبيل المثال مثل نظام الأهوار لا يمكن له البقاء في ظل هذه التحديات الكبيرة، يضاف لها التحدي المناخي الذي يكون تأثيره باعتقادي أقل بكثير مقارنة بالإجراءات التي يعني التدخل البشري سواء كان في العراق أو خارج العراق تأثيرها القاسي على الأهوال العراقية. فهذا العوامل الثلاثة طبعا عوامل خطيرة جدا، وأنا لا أجد ولم أجد هذه العوامل مدروسة بشكل جيد في أي برنامج حكومي، سواء كان في الوزارات المعنية مثل وزارة البيئة، وزارة يعني وزارة شكلية ما عندها دور حقيقي وما عندها إمكانيات حقيقية للتأثير على الوضع البيئي، أو وزارة الزراعة أو وزارة الموارد المائية أو الوزارات الأخرى المعنية بالبحث والعلوم والتكنولوجيا وما شاكل، ثم الوزارات المعنية بالطاقة التي هي غير قادرة على تزويد المجتمع بالطاقة لمدة 24 ساعة على سبيل المثال. قطع الكهرباء في العراق ما أكثر من 12 ساعة باليوم. القضية الأخرى التي تشكل خطر كبير جدا وتسهم بمضاعفة التأثيرات السلبية للتغير المناخي في العراق هي ما يسمى بالاستثمار. الاستثمار في العراق استثمار منفلت، استثمار يعني غير محدد. عندنا قانون للاستثمار، قانون رقم أعتقد 13 لسنة 2009 فشيء من هالقبيل، ولكن لا أحد يأخذ معايير الموجودة في هذا القانون بنظر الاعتبار. فالاستثمار يغلب دائما، يعني الاستثمار البشع غير المقونن الذي يكتسح المناطق الخضراء، الذي يجرف النخيل، الذي يستحوذ على الأراضي الرطبة، على الأراضي الزراعية، على الأراضي التي تسهم بتخفيف حدة المناخ. ثم بعد ذلك تأتي الحكومة متأخرة وتحاول أن تشرعن هذه التجاوزات على الاستخدامات الأرض، مثل ما يجري أيضا يعني حاليا وجرى سابقا، هذا تحت مسمى الاستثمار. وهذا الاستثمار أنا ما أعرف يعني بناء المدن والأحياء السكنية لماذا يتمدد في العراق باتجاه الأراضي الرطبة، أراضي الغابات وأراضي النخيل، بدلا من الأراضي المجاورة لها اللي هي أراضي يعني من الممكن أن يصير فيها تمدد المدن وأحياء، يعني urbanization. فهذه أيضا قضية يعني خطيرة، وهذه تسهم ب يعني اللوكال امباكت. المناخ لا يؤثر على العراق بصورة أكثر ما يؤثر على الكويت أو على الإمارات أو على أي دولة أخرى، ولكن احنا إحساسنا يعني تأثيرات هذه التغيرات اللي احنا نقولها تغيرات مناخية، بس هي أساسا نابعة من تدخلات بشرية في العراق وفي المناطق تجعل العراق باعتباره دولة أيضا يعني داون ستريم في ذنائب الأنهر. كانت هذه الأنهر كلها تأتي برمتها على العراق، الآن أقل من 50% مما كان يأتينا تاريخيا يصل إلى العراق، وعدد سكان العراق زاد على 40. المدن العراقية تشعبت وتوسعت بشكل عشوائي. ها المدينة مثل بغداد الآن بها 9 مليون نسمة، في حين الانفراستراكشر في المدينة المفروض يسند يعني 1.5 to 2 million people. فبالتالي الأزبال والمجاري والتلوث في الأنهار وفي الشوارع وكذا، كثير من الناس يلقي اللوم على التغير المناخي، وهذا كذب وخداع.
شكرا دكتور. So the additional points was in reference as a continuation of what was previously said regarding the marshes, in particular the marshes of southern Iraq were inscribed as a World UNESCO Heritage Site in July 2016. And there's a link here because of the coupling of the natural environment along with cultural sites as part of that a file that was submitted to UNESCO. And this shows also there is the impact or the legacies of previous policies, but also new human encroachments on the environment, absence of also producing absence of water, reduction of major water resources to the marshes, and this has had obviously a detrimental impact. We have in Iraq limited studies, scientific studies, but also the impact of ministries, whether directly concerned with the environment or indirectly, are limited, and their impact to address climate change are hugely limited. And this is also in the context of where Iraq suffers from electricity cuts. The current infrastructure is not in a position to provide 24 hours of constant electricity. So this gives you a context of the grave nature of priorities in the country. Also, and this was also a very important point about investment. And investment, as we've seen it post 2003, is unregulated and characterized by a significant impact on the natural environment, particularly agricultural or fertile areas or green areas, strategically green areas, and there's no real policy or cohesive policy to regulate investors. And Dr. Hassan Al-Janabi asks, why is there this interest from investors, or why are these areas being, or more specifically, why are these areas being allocated these are strategic, fertile areas. Why they're being allocated when there's plenty of other land that could be allocated to investors? And also our problems, as Dr. Hassan Al-Janabi is saying, are no different from those in UAE or Kuwait when it comes to the environment, but it is human encroachment and poor human policy that is affecting the nature of Iraq's environment. And there's been a reduction of water resources also downstream, and there are 40 million. The population of Iraq is 40 million. Most cities are being overwhelmed by the fact that infrastructure has not yet caught up with the increases in population. And Baghdad, the infrastructure for Baghdad is on paper should be for 1.5 to 2 million people, but Baghdad's population is 9 million. And so this is also something that we need to factor in, that it's not just climate change, but also more importantly, arguably more importantly, an impact of poor policy and governance and human encroachment when it comes to climate change or the impact on the natural environment. Thank you, Dr. Hassan. We'll come back to you with questions, and maybe some people will have some. Do you have anything to say? Any last points?
Yeah, two minutes if you allow me. أيضا examples يعني هذا. شوف نحن عندنا يعني أنا أحكي عن الماء الآن. عندنا مشاريع كبيرة جدا، يعني سدود كبيرة جدا، وعندنا قنوات كبيرة جدا ومبازل. كثير من هذه القنوات والمبازل والسدود أيضا غمرت مواقع أثرية تاريخية قديمة. يعني عندما أنشئت هذه السدود لم يؤخذ بنظر الاعتبار حماية هذه المواقع، وعندما نزلت على سبيل المثال سد الموصل الآن، مناسيب سد الموصل، هناك يعني مدينة أثرية قديمة تحت سد الموصل. نفس الشيء يعني لولا الحملة التي شنت في العراق وأنا كنت جزء منها لإيقاف سد مكحول، لكان سد مكحول أيضا كان غمر مدينة أثرية وأكثر من 200 موقع أثري في العراق. ونفس الشيء الحفريات، سواء كان ما يسمى بالمصب العام أو مبازل أخرى، كلها مرت بمناطق أثرية لم يعر لها أي اهتمام. وآخر شيء هو على سبيل المثال مطار النجف. مطار النجف الآن صحيح يؤدي خدمة مهمة للمدينة، ولكن مطار النجف والطرق الحولية المحيطة فيه، خاصة الطرق هذه بنيت في مناطق قديمة جدا، وآثار حطمت وتحطمت ونهبت من قبل الناس حتى يبنون طرق يعني بصورة أعتقد غير صحيحة. ثم أنا باعتقادي تجري منذ فترة طويلة أيضا توسعة مراقد الأئمة في النجف وكربلاء. والآن المراقد اللي عرفناها ما كنا شباب وكنا يعني صبيان كانت أصغر حجما، والآن يعني صارت فيها توسعات هائلة، وإحنا ما نعرف أيضا يعني هذه التوسعات الهائلة كم من التراث القديم والإرث الثقافي ابتلع آخرها. على سبيل المثال سوق الحويش في النجف أيضا نتيجة لتوسعة باعتقادي غير ضرورية للمرقد الشريف. يعني أنا أستطيع أن أحكي كثيرا عن هذا الموضوع، ولكن تعبتكم يمكن.
لا شكرا دكتور، المعلومات مفيدة جدا. There are large canals and dams in Iraq, and when some of these dams were built previously, there were no studies or thorough studies on the impact they may have on cultural heritage. And one example was Mosul Dam, but also recently Makhul Dam was proposed as a large dam in the province of Salahuddin Kirkuk, and that was proposed, or there was a statistic of potentially 200 archaeological sites that might have been affected by the building of Makhul Dam. And also another example is the Najaf airport, which was built to service pilgrims and Najaf as a province, but also the adjacent areas and roads, including the areas nearby, have been affected by development, and that has affected and damaged and undermined cultural heritage. Also, there's been a huge expansion of shrines and shrine cities. When he was some time ago, they used to be these shrines used to be in the shrine cities used to be much smaller, but now they have significantly expanded. Yet we do not have studies on the impact of those on the cities, and also on the cultural heritage of those cities. Thank you, Dr. Hassan Janabi. Thank you very much for that. We move now to Dr. Nadia. Dr. Nadia, would you like to share your presentation?
Yes.
Dr. Nadia Muzaffar Fawzi is an academic and research affiliated with the University of Basra and Northeastern University, which is in the US. Go ahead, Dr. Nadia.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation. And I'm lucky that I am after, sorry, do you see my presentation?
We don't see it.
Oh, I am sharing. Hold on just a second. No, sorry. Just a second. I can't find it. Can you share it from your side, Mihya, please?
I can share it if you prefer.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Okay, no problem.
Just can't find it. Thank you, Zainab. Yeah, so I'll talk while Zainab prepared that. The environment in Iraq, and as Dr. Janabi was referring to, climate change is a theme now that the world is all the world talking about. It's true that we are impacted by the climate change, but also our environment suffer seriously from issues, internal issues related to our management. Do you hear me now? Is it clear?
It's clear.
Oh, okay, thank you. So can I control the slides, or do you have to do that from your side?
I'll do it for you. So if you want to just let me know when to go to the next slide.
All right. Can we go to first slide, please? No, not this one. Oh, is it? Okay, yeah. So what I'm saying that the issues for the environment are internal also, and we have to admit that. Internal management is really poor over the years. Yes, we have less water, but we are not managing what we're having of water. And the example of the issue of sewage that is polluting all our rare water resources. So the issue of the environment is not straightforward. It's not easy. It's not just climate change. We have to talk about this, and we have to understand it very clearly. So what I want to talk about is what we did as a researcher about issues related to the droughts, to the what we call it the changes. I will not say climate change, just conscious about what Dr. Janabi was saying, but what the droughts and how the droughts impacted the environment in general, but specifically I'm talking now about the marshes. In our visits to the marshes and the rivers, Tigris and Euphrates, to look at the chemical and biological water qualities in these areas, it's really shocking to see the situation in the marshes, because the marshes, as most of you know, that they are fed by the Tigris and Euphrates. So, you know, looking at the environment in general, then while we were doing this, we were looking at also seeing the, you know, the demeanor, the situation of the people who are living in these areas. So can we move to the second slide? Because I don't want to go to tangible and intangible. I think most of you will know that, you know, what are the tangible heritage and non-tangible. The climate change impacting Iraq and the region is severe, and it's persisting, while mitigation is random and unreliable. And this is what I'm saying, that there isn't enough policies and actions that are helping people to manage the situation, to overcome issues that are happening there. And of course, we clearly notice the degradation, ecological restoration are not working. The adaptive management is not still there also of the environment, and it's intensifying global change. The whole Iraq environment is in a chaotic situation because of all these issues. We are not managing them really well. Also, there are sufficient long-term applied and methodological studies in Iraq and the region to the study of the effect of environmental changes on the cultural society. We don't have enough studies. As Dr. Janabi again highlighted that, it's really, we don't. But even the few studies that are there are not used enough. They are not, you know, taken in by ministries like Ministry of Water Resources, Ministry of the Environment. They are not talking to the, I am saying, the research scientists and the academics in the universities. They are not guiding the research that is going in the universities. So can we go to the second slide, please? Thank you. And when we went to the marshes, we started, you know, aside from the ecological side of water quality and biodiversity, we started to ask these questions. The two questions there are, the other one, please, Zainab. How has the discussion impacted women's interaction specifically with the environment? And what are the ways in which women previously benefited from these ecosystem services provided by the marshes, but no longer are able to use these benefits? So it's a paper that is well received internationally, but it's, you know, rarely mentioned in any, I would say, you know, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Water Resources, or any even in the academic, you know, around. So can we have this next slide? So I will give you only one slide of this paper because we presented in different parts of the world, actually, this paper specifically. This shows you the activities that women before the drying of the marshes used to interact with. It's agriculture, animal husbandry, fishing, handicrafts, reeds, collecting, going to the souk to sell their products, okay, compared to the domestic. So the blue lines show you how women before 19th, before the drying of the marshes. So the older women were telling us about their activities. This is they engaged with. When we compared these activities with the younger women that are, you know, born or lived in the marshes after the desiccation of the marshes between the 80s to 2003 and beyond. Actually, we did the research about 2013. So all these generations, if you see the last one, the domestic, see most or 90% of the women are domesticated. They have nothing to do with the marsh activities. Of course, we asked why. We needed to know from them why this is happening. I think the main reason was it's the dryness of the marshes and the access to the areas where the water is. They need to travel a long distance. Adding up to that is the security issues. As you know, after 2003, the area was, impacted by loss of insecurity. And that is forced the families to stop their women to participate in any of the activities that is related to the environment that they used to do. Can we move to the other one, please, to the next one? So if we look, the picture in the middle is from a published, very well-known Wheeler book in the 70s. And this indicates how the people lived and how they interacted with the environment compared to the pictures to the left and the right. This is when we went in 2013 and 14 to collect the data and the information. It shows you this is quite clear how the environment is changed and what is happening to this long history of culture interaction with the environment. Second, next slide, please. So I try to link these issues with the cultural heritage and with what UNESCO is saying about how the culture is related to the environment. So if we look at the natural World Heritage sites, for example, are ecosystems on land and sea. And this is, I wanted to specifically highlight because of our work that we do, say, in Iraq and Basra, southern Iraq, and especially the Marine Science Center where I used to work. We see that the importance of the history, the coastal area, and the marshes, how they are linked together and how they form, the history and the culture of this area. And because of what is happening now, as I showed in the slide, and of course, the farmers and the fishermen, all this culture of building boats depending on, fishing and agriculture in especially the date palm culture, it's all decimated because of what is happening. So this is the intangible effect of what is happening in the environment and how it is impacting the issues of the culture, of the agriculture, of the farming, of the marshes, of the ecosystem in general. But I specifically want to highlight also that even the coastal areas, the sea, the north part of the Arabian Gulf, we have resources that is rarely mentioned. Again, we published a paper about discovery of the coral reef in this area. This is a unique for a study of climate change, especially in this area. And it's hardly continued after that because we worked in a funding with with German university. They brought their equipment and the funding and came and worked, and we published a paper because they discovered while they were trying to train our staff on diving. So this is discovered, but we couldn't continue the research in this area looking at this unique situation of finding a coral reef in such a shallow, highly turbid, highly impacted by pollution and traffic of sea traffic of oil ships and everything else in this area. This is a unique opportunity that we are missing also. So I don't want to go in details. It's just pointing out that the heritage is the environmental heritage that we are losing with all these changes. We are not giving enough attention to. Okay, and we are losing. This is the site, the coral reef site that is published also. So shall we go to the next slide, please? And you know, when we simply, I mean, I'm not expert in the culture and in the heritage, but when we look at how we are losing simple things, easy access, easy maintained, compared to bringing in new technologies that is not a part of the culture. There is no training, there is no maintenance, there is no funding or employing people to maintain these things. And we leave them and we cause lots of disappointment to people in the area, especially in the marshes and deep in the farmers' sites, farming areas. So if we look at the bridges that the people from millennia, they build it from natural materials, compared to the bridge of the metal bridge to the left of the slide, and to the solar system that is put in the edge of the marsh, taking water from the second slide, from this stream, which is highly polluted and there is hardly enough water. And we suppose the people in this area, they benefit from it for clean water. But can you imagine if the bridge is broken, and we saw that some of the bridges, metal bridges, are broken and they are not maintained, and people go back and use the traditional way of using the bridges. While those solar systems that are put by a volunteer supporting organizations that come from outside the country and spend millions, lots of money in doing these things, but when they leave these things, there is no maintenance, there is no continuity. Government is not paying for or employ anyone to maintain these things. So they stand there and people go and buy water from trucks. Next slide, please. So environment, now we are doing another research. I am lucky that actually most of the work that I'm doing, it's in partnership with now issues of the environment and the how we are losing culture, how we are losing our connection with the environment due to the droughts and the changing of the climate, and the difficulties that is facing the government, that we don't have enough policies set to give it training, to fund, to restore, environment. Now we came with the idea to look at the environmental perspective from Iraqi people. So the study, this is in partnership with the University of Northeastern in Boston. Both Dr. Colley and Dr. Helmut are, both of them are, renowned, and they work on two issues that we will highlight then. Actually, we worked a very long time to put a questionnaire, and we send it to through WhatsApp, through different media, to people in Iraq to respond to the questions. The first thing, and this is again to highlight Dr. Ajanabi was saying, the first thing that I received from people, why you are doing this? What's the benefit of doing this? So no one even worry or even notice the paper. So I'm trying to respond to these whys first before I go to the details. Why do a survey specifically about the perception of Iraqis about the environment? First is to track public views over time, because I will see if there are other surveys like this has been done previously. Okay, and the second thing that we need to think about, please go back to the slide, because I need to read those ones. Zainab, oh yeah, thank you. So explore rising awareness of the impact and effect of people on nature and the resources. So it's either resources in general, either tangible, non-tangible, cultural heritage, or the environment in general. Capture the nation's knowledge about the environment relative to threats, like the droughts, the management of the environment. All our water resources are not natural anymore. They are heavily, we don't have a flooding season as we used to have before. Every time that, some place needed water, they system was supposed to be natural. It's not natural anymore. But still, within these changes, we don't take care about the things that inside the water. We think of the water just water for maybe drinking and agriculture, but we don't think about the biodiversity in these waters and how these biodiversity impact the quality of the water itself. So that we need to know. People, even with the ministries, this is the question that I asked for the Ministry of Water Resources and Ministry of the Environment. How do you plan to open channels or transfer water from one side to the other side, or put dikes, put sills, put whatever, like the discussion about the stopping the salt water wish to come? It's just easy, just to block it. How do you block a system that is impacted by tide and it thrives on the changes of the salinity daily, because we have the flow and ebb of the water from the Gulf that is creating the whole water diversity in the estuary, for example. So these are the issues that and that's why the importance of understanding people, how much they are aware of the environmental issues. So when issues arise, they can, I don't know, fight it. They can defend it. They can look at it and say, okay, this is right or wrong. Of course, it is documenting favorable and unfavorable conditions. That happens in the Sumerian time, was documented actually. When you go as a historian now and read it, it was documented. So you are understanding the situation, how it was before. So we want to just document what is happening now for a future generation also to understand what's going on. Thank you. Can go to the next one, please.
Dr. Nadia, we have just a minute, if possible.
Okay.
So,
yeah. All right. So the question is in this area is how the influence of people have toward natural world. To understand it, we need to understand how people think about the natural world. So let's go to the one quickly to the next one. So when we are analyzing the responses from people, actually, can we go to the next slide, please, very quickly? So the responses reflect the situation. You know, people think about the health system or the freshwater system. It's healthier in the north compared to the middle, compared to the south. So the reflections is really reflecting on the water quality, so people can see it. Can we go to the last one? And this is the last one. I'm not going, but we can talk about the rest on the discussion. So in importance of nature to you personally as a person, compared to the options, nature, economy, education, clean drinking water, the priorities for people are education and safety in the middle, in the north, middle, south, compared to water quality or the environment or the river quality. So the priorities for people are interesting, but it's reflected on the issues that are facing them now. Okay, so let's, do you want me to stop? Because I think there are two other
Thank you,
three
Dr.
slides.
Nadia.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. There are some questions also for you in the Q&A. You can answer them directly, or we can, if we have enough time. Thank you for that very informative presentation. Our next speaker is Hussam Subhi, researcher on climate change in Iraq and a co-founder of the Iraq Green Observatory, a non-governmental entity. Go ahead, Hussam.
شكرا دكتور مهيار. طبعا شكر كبير لشبكة النهرين وكادرها الموقر على هذه الفرصة الرائعة. سعيد جدا طبعا بوجودي مع نخبة من الأكاديميين والباحثين في هذا الشأن. بالحديث طبعا عن المواقع الأثرية وما تواجهه اليوم يعني نتيجة التغير المناخي، نرى أن من الغريب لم تشارك الحكومة العراقية وتنشر التقرير السنوي التابع لليونسكو الخاص بمواقع التراث العالمي لهذا العام، كما أنه لا يوجد لأي موقع عراقي أثري على برنامج المناقشات العامة في مؤتمر اليونسكو لمواقع التراث العالمي، وهو شيء غريب صراحة. يعني خلينا قدام سؤال مهم: هل هذا نذير بخروج المواقع الأثرية العراقية التي سجلت بلائحة التراث العالمي من هذه اللائحة؟ طبعا انضمام الأهوار بعام 2016 إلى لائحة التراث العالمي أعطانا فد بشير خير، أنه انضمام هذه المنطقة سيضمن استدامة وانتعاش هذه المنطقة بالشكل الصحيح، لكنها اليوم تعاني من عدة مشاكل مثل شحة المياه وانخفاض الواردات المائية إلى هذه المنطقة، بجانب المئات من حالات الهجرة القسرية التي حدثت في الثلاث أو 4 سنين الماضية، وبجانب أيضا شحة الموارد لساكني هذه المنطقة. وطبعا هذا كله نابع من سوء إدارة الموارد المائية بالدرجة الأساس، بجانب طبعا تأثيرات التغير المناخي على المنطقة. هناك جانب آخر من أثر التغير المناخي على المنطقة وهو إيجابي نوعا ما في السنين الأخيرة، وبسبب شحة المياه الدارجة في العراق. طبعا راح أشير لنفس النقطة اللي ذكرها دكتور حسن، وهي أنه الجفاف وانخفاض منسوب مياه سد الموصل الشمالي العراق كشف عن 3 معالم تاريخية يزيدية بعدما طمرت في مياه السد لقرابة 40 عام تقريبا. طبعا هذه المعالم الأثرية شملت مدرسة ابتدائية ومقبرة ومزار ديني يزيدي في قرية خانكي القديمة الواقعة على ضفاف بحيرة سد الموصل في محافظة دهوك. بالإضافة إلى ذلك في وقت سابق عثر على موقع أثري داخل حوض نهر دجلة بعد انحسار المياه فيه، طبعا يعود إلى قبل أكثر من 3500 سنة في محافظة دهوك أيضا. من المهم الإشارة أنه التقييم اللي أعدته منظمة اليونسكو الأخير في عام 2023 والاتحاد الدولي لحفظ الطبيعة والموارد الطبيعية، أن مواقع اليونسكو للتراث العالمي تأوي أكثر من 20% من ثروة الكائنات الحية. إذن اليوم التغير المناخي ما يأثر بشكل مباشر بس على هذه المواقع، هو أيضا يأثر على التنوع الحيوي لهذه المناطق بشكل مباشر. شكرا جزيلا مهيار. أنا يعني حستقبل الأسئلة اللي موجودة على البانل وراح أجاوبها بشكل مباشر حتى ما أطول عليكم.
شكرا أستاذ حسام. أنت حضرتك ما عندك presentation صحيح؟
لا ما قدمت.
So Hussam underlines the changes that are happening in terms of the impact of climate emergency on cultural heritage. He's mentioned that, and please correct me if I've mistranslated this, or if I mistranslate this, is that this year there has been no issuance of state reports regarding UNESCO sites in Iraq, right? And also this alludes to a problem, as Hussam has suggested. And there is obviously a major issue of drought, a reduction in water resources in Iraq, which has led in recent years to displacement. And also this is an outcome of the poor management of water resources in Iraq. We recently witnessed in the Mosul Dam Basin, in the region of Mosul Dam, the discovery of 3 new cultural historic sites. One of them, some of them are millennia old, and they were discovered because of the reduction in water resources. And the other point was about the I don't know if I've got this correctly, but you've said 20% of sites in Iraq are of living heritage or sites that are in near living populations or settlements, and this is also important because of the fact that these are not just monuments in the desert as such, but actually are part and parcel of living ecosystems in the country. I believe those are the main points that were that you were. If there's anything missing, do let me know. Can we move on to Dr. Ibrahim Sudani? تفضل دكتور إبراهيم.
السلام عليكم.
سلام دكتور، تفضل.
مساء الخير دكتور
الله
كاظم.
يخليك الله يخليك.
الحضور وشكرا جزيلا لشبكة النهر. شكرا جزيلا لشبكة النهرين. شكرا أستاذ حسام صبحي والطيبة، طبعا أستاذنا دكتور الجنابي اللي عرفته منذ 2003 في أهوار الجنوب، وإلى اليوم هو لا زال معطاه، وإن شاء الله يطول لنا بعمره ويضيفنا من خبرته وحكمته. حقيقة الحديث عن مواقع المهمة للتراث العالمي في العراق هو حديث ذا شجون حال كثير من الملفات العراقية البيئية على وجه الخصوص، لما عانته من إهمال وتضييع نتيجة للظروف اللي عاشها العراق منذ السبعينيات وإلى اليوم. لا زال العراق يعني على صفيح ساخن. أركز حديث حقيقة حول تأثير تغيرات المناخ على المواقع الأهوارية اللي أدرجت في 2016 على لائحة التراث العالمي. وحقيقة هذه المواقع ذكرت في اجتماع اليونسكو في 2022، وكان العراق قد رفع تقرير للأسف ب 23 كما ناول الزميل حسام. للأسف احنا فقدنا فرصة حقيقية بسبب تقاعس وزارة الموارد المائية عن رفع التقرير السنوي. بالتالي كان المواقع التراثية العراقية مدرجة على لائحة لقاء الرياض القادم في 10 إلى 15 سبتمبر، ومن ثم أزيلت لأن التقرير العراقي ما واصل. والتقرير طبعا هو تعد لجنة من عدة وزارات ترأسها وزارة الموارد المائية، وهذا طبعا لازم الحكومة تشوف شنو الأسباب اللي أدت إلى هذا الشيء. اللي أريد أقوله في 22 الدول الأطراف أخذت خبر والعراق رفع أنه مواقعنا الأهوارية تتعرض لجفاف وإلى مشاكل حقيقية بسبب السياسات المائية لدول المنبع، دول الجوار، وعلى وجه الخصوص الجارة تركيا اللي عملت على بناء سلسلة من السدود حرمت العراق من كميات كبيرة من المياه على وجه غير عادل وغير إنساني. وبالتالي المواقع المهمة للتراث العالمي، احنا من نتحدث عن التراث العالمي نتحدث سادة الأفاضل عن الإنسان بالدرجة الأولى، وعن حياة الإنسان القديمة، وعن ذكريات الإنسان. إذا الهور ما بي مي ما بي إنسان، وإذا ماكو إنسان ماكو حياة. الهور ما بي مي ما بي تنوع إحيائي ولا طيور ولا أسماك ولا أي كائنات حية أخرى. بالتالي اليونسكو بقرارها دعت دول الجوار إلى أن تراعي الأهمية العالمية لمواقع الأهوار العراقية. للأسف لم نرى أي تغيير لسياسات دول الجوار سواء إيران أو تركيا، وحتى سوريا بالآونة الأخيرة بدأت تضغط علينا بقضية المياه وبدأت مواقعنا تتأثر. طبعا هذا فيما يخص سياسة دول الجوار المائية. أضف إليها قلة المتساقطات المطرية وارتفاع نسب التبخر، ومعروف جدا أن مناطق الأهوار هي مياه شالو ووتر، بالتالي الإيفابوريشن يصير عالي، التبخر عالي بها، وأمطار قليلة، وكل ذلك كان طبعا محاط بإدارة غير متكاملة وغير حديثة لهذه المناطق من قبل الحكومات العراقية المتعاقبة. احنا يمكن أنطي علم الأستاذ دكتور حسن أن الحكومة الأخيرة لحكومة محمد شاع السوداني في برنامجها وضعت يعني أبواب مفصلة لحماية البيئة وقضايا المياه. وأيضا أول مرة بتاريخ العراق نشهد تخصيص 7 مليارات دولار من الموازنة لقضايا تخص البيئة بعنوان واضح أنها لقضايا البيئة. أعتقد أكو جهود جاي تبذل، ولكن نحن بحاجة إلى أن يسمع العالم صوتنا. واليوم شبكة النهرين المتفضلين والأخوة المنظمين زينب ودكتور كاظم ساعدونا بأن نتحدث على مستوى عالمي. نعم، العراق بحاجة إلى جميع أصدقائه، العراق بحاجة، الإنسان العراقي والبيئة العراقية ومواقعنا المهمة للتراث العالمي بحاجة لدعم دولي، سواء على مستوى الخبرات، على مستوى الإعلام، على مستوى التوعية. وأتمنى أن يخرج من هذه الجلسة وهذا البانل تخرج من عنده بعض المخرجات اللي ممكن أن تكون برامج تطبيقية، أو ممكن أن تخلق شراكات حقيقية تساعد البيئة العراقية والعاملين فيها. وأنا عن نفسي أنا أستاذ أكاديمي ومنتدب كخبير استشاري في مكتب رئيس الوزراء العراقي، اللي شكل حقيقة فريق متخصص في قضايا البيئة وتغيرات المناخ، وحاضر لأي تعاون مع جنابكم مع المنظمات الدولية في إيصال الصوت العراقي إلى يعني أذهان العالم. ونحتاج إلى ضغط دبلوماسي وضغط إنساني وضغط حضاري وثقافي على كل من تركيا وإيران وسوريا لإعادة الحياة للمواقع الأهوارية المهمة للتراث العالمي. وأكرر شكري الجزيل لجميع الحاضرين والمنظمين، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Shukran, Dr. Ibrahim. I will translate what was said, but also I'd like to reintroduce Dr. Ibrahim because I wasn't able to do that. He's a researcher at the College of Energy and Environment at Karkh University of Science. Dr. Ibrahim started with the clear issue of there has been a crisis in Iraq since the 70s. And this is something that we've known for the past few decades, that crisis, or Iraq has been in a vulnerable state for some time, and of significance in relation to the case study that he mentioned, which regarding El Ahwar or the marshes, that in 2016 the marshes was registered as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, but there are issues regarding that now because of the impact of water resources or poor water resources, reduction of water resources, and that is affecting the marshes. There's also an issue regarding state reports, national reports that are issued by state agencies and ministries, including from the Ministry of Water Resources. And to 2023, we have not seen those reports, which are seemingly issued on an annual basis. Now, also, Dr. Ibrahim mentioned the impact of dams, the construction of dams, including in Turkey, and that and this is and has affected severely the marshes of the south, which including many other sites, but marshes in the south that was mentioned in particular, and that without water there is no life, or an absence of life because of the nature of the significance that water nourishes, and also it was mentioned that in recently that Syria also has become increasing policies in Syria have also led to reduction, as well as those from Iran, reduction in water. The nature of the marshes is that it's shallow water, which means that evaporation is at a greater or faster pace in the marshes. The current government has allocated funding, and Dr. Ibrahim is part of a committee or a group that is tied to that, or tied to, not necessarily to that, but to the, as he works as an advisor as part of a new group that was established by the current government to address climate change in the country, and some funding, I believe $7 million, but I could be mistaken with that, but it was said that was 7 million, sorry, 7 million, yeah, 7 million that was allocated to that. The speaker also underlined the need for international support for the protection, safeguarding of sites, including raising awareness and also working with experts, even if those lead to outputs in terms of practice or solutions, that is most welcome, but also in terms of building partnerships. And also, I've said this already, but he's an advisor and part of a group that is advising the current government. But also he underlines the need for any kind of support, whether it be diplomatic, in relation to the nature of Iraq's water resources, particularly because it's connected to Iraq's neighbors, but also any kind of support regarding the safeguarding of Iraqi cultural heritage is necessary. شكرا دكتور. ممكن الأستاذ أبو الحسن إذا ممكن نسمع صوتك. I don't know if he's is here, the final speaker. If he's not, we'll take the next 20 minutes to take questions and answers. Ustad Abu Hassan. Okay, so we can take some questions from, there's quite a few questions. Dr. Hassan, are you with us?
نعم.
دكتور اكو اسئله يعني اللي حضرتك يعني موجوده، اذا تريد اقرا لك الاسئله وانطيك فد نبذه عن the first, let me just go through one by one.
أنا قرأت السؤال من سلمان.
اتفضل دكتور اذا ممكن تجاوب السؤال.
سلمان راح اجاوبك باختصار، وطبعا احييك يعني باختصار شديد. ايش قد نسبه تاثير التغير المناخي في الاهوال العراقيه؟ يعني انا ما اريد انطي نسبه، بس شوف انا اقول لك شيء، انه انت تخيل الان للحظه بانه لا يوجد اي سد على دجله والفرات والروافد، يعني ماكو سدود، بمعنى ترجع الحاله مثل ما كانت عام 1970. يعني بال 75 بنت أول سدود هناك يعني في الأعالي بالعراق احنا بنينا من الخمسينات. بس تخيل انه هذه السدود ما موجوده. اذا هذه السدود ما موجوده، انا لا اعتقد بان الوضع الحالي في الاهوار راح يكون مثل ما احنا نشوفه. انا اعتقد الاهوار حسب كل تاريخها تمر في فتره يعني انتعاش وتوسع في مواسم الربيع، ثم تشح وتتقلص في مواسم الصيف وهكذا. وأنا من دراستي للوضع حتى في الخمسينات بعض المناطق التي كانت مغمورة بالأهوار شهدت جفافا قاسيا. أنا فوجئت أنه في واحدة من المناطق اللي تكثر فيها زراعة الشلب في المشخار على سبيل المثال، بالخمسينات حفروا آبار بسبب الشحة المائية، يعني قبل وجود السدود. لهذا السبب ما ممكن أن أعطي نسبة تأثير التغيرات المناخية على الأهوار. أنا أعتقد قليلة جدا، negligible، ممكن إهمال تأثير التغير المناخي على الأهوار مقارنة بالتغير الناتج عن التأثير البشري والسيطرة. يعني هناك مبالغات كثيرة فيما يتعلق بربط ما يجري في الأهوار الذي هو ناتج مباشر لسياسات تشغيلية ولسياسات السيطرة في العراق والسيطرة على جريان المياه في العراق وفي المناطق الأخرى. يعني يجب أن نكون واضحين عزيزي سلمان بهذا الموضوع. يعني يجب أن نضع يعني التشخيص، يعني تشخيص الخلل هو الذي يقود إلى سياسات صحيحة. نحن بحاجة إلى أن نبحث يعني internally وطنيا وأيضا مناطقيا يعني regional عن عن الأسباب حتى يمكن معالجة. ما يتعلق بالتحركات الدبلوماسية مع تركيا وإيران، أنا أعتقد طبعا يعني هي يجب يعني بالنتيجة ما عندنا احنا غير هذا الخيار، ولكن الواقع تغير كثيرا، وهاتان الدولتان هم أقوى بكثير من العراق، بإمكانهما فرض واقع غير مرغوب فيه احنا في العراق. ولكن هذا لا يمنع ولا يضعف موقفنا المطالب بحقوقنا يعني مع هاتين الدولتين الجارتين. نعم.
Yeah. So one of the questions that was raised was, can we measure the impact of climate change on the marshes? And Dr. Hassan said that it's important to identify the sources or the causes of the problems and challenges, and that's one way or a key way or central way in which we can better understand and help address and intervene in relation to the crisis in the marshes. And there was a question about Turkey and Iran or using diplomatic channels, and Dr. Hassan, of course, is familiar with that, those channels, but the Iraq's power relationship has changed over the past 20, 30 years, but that is also an essential part of water diplomacy. Could we, Dr. Nadia, are you there?
Yes.
One of the questions is, are there any other environmental factors that Iraqi women participate in and benefit from the marshes? Any environmental, are there any environmental factors that Iraqi women participate and benefit from? So this is a question really about the relationship
I
environment
didn't understand what's the meaning of that. I mean, do you hear me?
Yeah, the question, I believe the question is, let me see. Yeah, the question really is about the how women benefit from the local economy and how that's impacted by the detrimental component or impact of the environment on women's livelihoods.
Yeah, I mean, we said that financially the women used to support themselves and support their families by, fishing and selling in the market, doing handcraft and work, and also selling it. So what else? I mean, I can't understand what's the other thing that maybe he like.
Yeah, the question is that are there any other ecosystems in there other than the marshes? Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, it's not clear, but I responded that farmers in the farms by around the rivers, around the estuary, used to also do lots of activities and handicrafts and sell their products, which are not doing anymore because also of the issues of the water. But can I just say something about Dr. Janabi saying about the water issues and how the climate change is not impacting, it's just the water? I think, is it possible to respond to that or not?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just, yeah. From environmental point of view, as I mentioned, that the water cycle is very important. The not just the drought, but I mean, talking about specifically about
So Dr. Nadia has had an internet problem. Can I ask? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, how the picture that you saw of the area where in Chabayish, for example, that was really green and lush with the with the reeds, and compared to what I showed you in a recent picture, where does that come from? Where the water went? So there is no water, but I appreciate and respect system is in fact engineered. This is what I'm saying. The whole system is engineered, heavily engineered. That is no, natural flow in the system, which is causing lots of problems. So I don't know, is this an agreement with what Dr. Janabi is saying, or it's disagreement with what is he saying?
Yeah. Can I just ask a question, relay a question which I think is very important, and this question, I guess it's for anyone who wants to answer it, but including Dr. Hassan. The question really is about the effect on national security of loss of heritage landscapes and ways of living in the marshes, but also elsewhere. And how will it affect? Is it a threat to security? And this is, as we know, this is a question that also is related to displacement, movement of people within the country, but also outside the country. And that's just perhaps just one component of it. Does any of the speakers want to say anything about this particular relationship between security and cultural heritage and climate change?
Yes, I can give an example, practical example, from the, since the Iraq-Iran war, is thousands of families fled the area in the south, in Basra, near the borders with Iran, and they relocated, of course, everywhere in Iraq, but in particular place in Najaf, south of Najaf on the Euphrates River. There's an area I visited a few months ago called Khashim. And this Khashim area, now I think it is housing like more than 1,000 families. All these families, they have water buffaloes, and they sell all the milk and gamer and everything that is common in Iraq, and also they are big families, and so they built their lives in this an ancient area where a very famous Christian cemetery is located. So of course these are I mean, this area became like inaccessible for like authorities and what have you. So these people, they take care of themselves and they make their living there. There is no police, there is no schools, nothing there except the water buffaloes and next to the water. So that cemetery has been looted over time. I pictured that, I visited that, I also wrote about it, and I contacted the Ministry of Culture about it. But to my disappointment, that this area, the cemetery that has been digged out and the things, the treasures of it is looted, have been granted as an investment site to build, like, I don't know, houses, buildings, whatever. So this is a very vivid example of internal displacement caused by war and also by the draining of the marshes. For these people to move, so it's internally displaced people, and then they relocated in a heritage area, and that area has been destroyed. And after the destruction, the government granted that area for some investors to build in that. It is just a horrible state of affairs. This is just one example that I'm giving here.
Thank you, Dr. Hassan. The case study, and we need more case studies to write about and analyze. That's very important. Thank you for that. Dr. Ibrahim.
يس السلام عليكم، شكرا جزيلا من جديد. حقيقة هو قضية الربط بين تغيرات المناخ وكلايمت تشينج والسكيورتي وأيضا الكالتشر هيريتيج قضية متواصلة جدا، لأننا يعني يونسكو لما اعتبرت مواقع الأهوار مهمة للتراث العالمي، أعتقد الأهمية رقم واحد هي تعود لنمط الحياة التقليدي اللي يمتد إلى آلاف السنين، هسه 5000 7000 سنة. بالتالي هذا النمط مرتبط بالإنسان، والإنسان لا يشعر بالأمان إلا في موقعه الأصلي وفي بيئته الحقيقية. ويمكن أتداخل ويا دكتورة نادية اللي أشارت بإشارة لطيفة ودقيقة جدا، أنه حتى قضية الجندر إكويتي أو التعادل والفرص المتساوية للجنسين بالعمل قلت، وراحت المرأة باتجاه الدومستيك، صارت منزلية أكثر، في حين إحنا نشوف المرأة الأهوارية أكثر نشاط وأكثر عطاء وأكثر تقديم للعمل والتفاعل بالمجتمع الأهواري. هذا يهدد أمن العائلة حتى، لأن اليوم لما العائلة موجودة في موقعها، في مدينتها، بهورها، بحياتها التقليدية، مصادر العيش عندها معتمدة على الطبيعة، تكون مستقرة أكثر، وباعتبار الأسرة أو العائلة هي نواة المجتمع، بالتالي تفكك هاي الأسرة وانتقالها من الهور إلى المدينة، وأيضا جو المدينة وطبيعة المدينة ما منسجم وياها ابن الأهوار أو ابن الكذا، وصار عندنا مشاكل. حقيقة أنا أتكلم عن يعني شلون هسه أتكلم أستاذي الدكتور جنابي عن المدينة هاي بالنجف. في بغداد العاصمة هنالك أكثر من أماكن محيطة ببغداد كانت هي معسكرات للجيش السابق. الناس اللي نسحوا من الأهوار وخاصة مربي جاموس جابوا جاموسهم وعاشوا، سووا بيئة اصطناعية بهاي المعسكرات. وأيضا جزء من عندهم هو كان خلينا نقول هارب من الجيش، عنده مشاكل ويا الحكومة، عنده كذا، فبدأوا ينقلون بعض هاي المشاكل إلى المجتمعات اللي اجوا بيها. بالتالي هذا عدم الانسجام، النزوح الداخلي، التغيير بالديموغرافيا للمدن والمناطق سببه جاي من تغيرات المناخ، بالإضافة إلى السياسات المائية للدول الجوار، اثنين هن ضغطا على طبيعة الديموغرافيا العراقية، وبالتالي تهدد الأمن وتهدد حتى المواقع المهمة للتراث العالمي اللي بعض منها مواقع تاريخية قد تتأثر بالنهب والسلب والتخريب. شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you, Dr. Ibrahim. I'll quickly summarize that. Dr. Ibrahim says that there are strong linkages, connections between security, the environment, and cultural heritage. And also, one of the clear cases of this affecting even at a household level is also issues or the issue of gender equality within households, and this is also affected the power dynamics within households between members of the household. And also in the rural to urban or rural to big city migration, you've also had the transfer or the transference of problems, and that's also associated with the lack or an absence of integrating adequately in the new environments in which displaced individuals or those who are migrating from one place to another are experiencing. And so there are clear links in this case. Can we quickly take what role do you feel that the Iraqi and international NGOs can play in addressing some of the problems you mentioned? What would be the most effective approach, given that some activists, sorry, someone, don't know if this, I don't know, the role of, I don't know where it disappeared to.
Do you allow me to answer one question, please?
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I think by Mr. Alusi, I just read it, but then it disappeared. And he was, he talked about the fragmentation of the water sector in Iraq. And I just wanted to agree with him. The water sector is completely disintegrated in Iraq. The stakeholders, they don't really coordinate anything. The Ministry of Water Resources does not properly coordinate with other ministries, whether it is agriculture, environment, municipalities, and public works, and also with the local government. That's why I think we have a major issue in the governance of water in Iraq, and this need to be reformed. And the reforming of this is a huge task, but so far there is no intention, it seems, at a higher level, a political level, to do that. So this is my answer to Mr. Al-Alusi, I think I remember.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hassan. There was a question on heritage activists. I don't know if Hussam wants to answer that, anyone else? If we can quickly answer that. What is the realistic solutions and effective steps that we can do as an environment to solve the water issues in Iraq? That's a very broad question. There is a question here, also I think very similar. What actions can be taken in the short and medium term to restore the marshes and cultural heritage, and how awareness raising and education can support this? Now, can we just focus quickly for the next 2-3 minutes on the role of awareness raising and education in Iraq? If Dr. Nadia, if you think this is something you can address, is there a role for education, whether it be public education or formal education, in addressing climate change? And because Dr. Hassan Al-Janabi said that the Iraqi population is reactionary and it's trying to address many issues, including the absence of infrastructure, but they are misled, or we have a very poor media that doesn't really have the facts. So is there a role for education?
I would love to answer this, but my internet seems it's weak, so it's cut off the, I can't hear everything. But in any case, if you are asking me, I definitely say the issue of solving, the marshes with the heritage it's not something that it's you know, a short-term solution. There is no short-term solution, and definitely I am saying that education is really, really important. And the issue is education is not just for, you know, we need to start from kindergarten. And this is one of the last slides that I was talking about, is we need the education about the environment is really important. It seems that, you know, one of the questions, and my colleagues who are from US said, wow, you know, the answer to a question that water is life. I said, yes, our teaching from Quran is, you know, we create everything from water. This is easy said, but how we implement this thing is very difficult. We don't interact with the environment properly because we lack awareness. And this awareness is coming from education, and the education is even with the people who are working in the ministries, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Water Resources, and those are a key to need more and more and more of education, really. And we need to update ourselves, all of us. I mean, it's nothing, we can't stop learning and looking at experience from other places. As was said, what's the difference? And always I'm sorry, I'm taking lots of time, but it's exactly, I'm saying, you know, look at the environment in southern Iraq, compare it to Kuwait and the UAE. They don't have any water resource, fresh water, but the green in the area is much more than what do we have now. Okay, so it's all to commitment from the government and working with the people.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Dr. Nadia. Dr. Ibrahim.
شكرا جزيلا. حقيقة قضية التعليم البيئي بدأ بها العراق، وهناك مناهج بالابتدائية تعطي touches about the environmental protection. والآن تشكلت لجنة ديوانية بأمر دولة رئيس الوزراء لدراسة إدماج مفاهيم حماية البيئة في المناهج الدراسية. وأيضا صدر قرار من السيد وزير التعليم العالي بأن يكون درس حماية البيئة والوعي البيئة أحد الدروس المفروضة أو الإجبارية على جميع الطلبة في الجامعات. هاي حقيقة خطوات حاولنا بالحكومة العراقية أن نتواصل مع اليونسكو ونمثلهم بالعراق، ونأخذ من تجاربهم وتجارب الدول بما يعرف بالتعليم الأخضر و sustainable education. بس أنا أود أن أوجه رسالة هي مو كلش رسمية، هي عراقية إنسانية. كل من يستطيع أن يساعدنا في قضايا التوعية، في قضايا التعليم البيئي، في قضايا الإعلام لحماية البيئة، سواء يساعدنا بفكرة، سواء يساعدنا بتمويل، سواء يساعدنا بعقد ورشة، بأي شيء كان، ولو أن يساعدنا بحضور فعالياتنا ويعطينا ملاحظات على ما جاي نسوي. احنا يعني انا بشكل شخصي ومكتب رئيس الوزراء وكل العاملين في الحكومة العراقية ممنونين ويتشكرون من اي شخص يقدم لنا المساعدة، ومقدمتهم طبعا شبكة النهرين. شكرا جزيلا.
Shukran, Doctor. I'll quickly summarize that. Dr. Ibrahim said that there are now attempts to integrate knowledge and learning of the environment at primary school level, and these tenets of learning are becoming or planned to become compulsory. And this is something that's been proposed by the Ministry of Higher Education to actually make the study of the environment a compulsory element in at a university level. And also Dr. Ibrahim underlined the need for or is inviting organizations and experts, individuals who are interested in working with them, with the Prime Minister's office and with him as an academic, to work on raising awareness or even implementing and organizing a seminar, even at that level. All those things are necessary in the current state of things. I think we've run out of time. We've been speaking for 2 hours. Dr. Ibrahim, عندك سؤال؟ عندك So thank you. Dr. Alexander, do you have any, if you would like to say anything, anything additional?
No, just to say that regarding the last point, in the UK, it's they are trying to mainstream now climate change into existing the curriculum at the school level. I've been asked in the past few months to review like some curriculum changes as part of a program. For example, incorporating the climate change in language classes, like when people are learning languages, for example, they have to debate a specific topic and they include like climate change as one of the options. Just to say that they've been moving towards that in the past few months.
Yeah, that's really good news. And if we can have any of those case studies, we can share them with our colleagues in Iraq, particularly in the ways in which education about the environment is being mainstreamed at a university level. Thank you to Dr. Hassan Al-Janabi. Thank you to Dr. Alexander. Thank you to Hussam, who helped organize this. And of course to Zainab, who's part of the Nahrain Network, Dr. Nadia, Dr. Ibrahim. I think we've been very fruitful today. I think many issues and points of discussion. I think it's good food for thought, at least going forward. We are, as Nahrain Network, ready to work with universities, whether in UK or in Iraq, to raise awareness at a university level, or to work at a research level or technical level, to develop partnerships between Iraqi universities and UK universities. And I think this has come out from our discussions that there is a strong need, whether it be in preparation of studies, statistics, or transfer of knowledge, workshops, research outputs of many different sort of hues and dimensions, and we're ready to support those programs. So please do look at our website, the Nahrain Network, and there will be a meeting in early October where we will be discussing the Nahrain Network research grants. Thank you for everyone again, for taking the time. I know it's quite late, it's 10 p.m. now in Iraq. So this has been recorded and it will be uploaded onto our website and also shared on our social media.